let's move into like a topic that I'm really interested in. I'm really curious about like the tech and like the tools behind production. I'm specifically like really curious on like how do they compare, which ones maybe like is it easy, is one easier, one harder, but the one that's easy maybe is it like not as like it doesn't give as much many options as the one that's hard. And how specifically did you learn these tools and stuff like that? So if anyone wants to, Reef, you want to get us started with this maybe?
Yeah, can do. So, like, I've mostly done online productions for the last few years until recently, and in those online productions is always used to be OBS until I started university, and that's where I got introduced into stuff like vMix, and we had a look at that. We learned it through tutor, and then basically learned all the rest comes with it. You just have to like try new different things and get just experiment really. That's how you mostly learn those kind of situations. Look stuff up. There's a lot of scripting that goes into it. The difference between those softwares is one is free, the other one is 1,200 a year, which
Wow.
is sometimes you can get free trials or other prices, of course. But with vMix, you can do a lot of other cool stuff. It's also for like larger events, there's other like tech hardware that you have in person, like ROS, ATEM, Blackmagic stuff. But for online broadcasts, I pretty much really prefer vMix from now on. OBS is really fun for like streamers. You can also do some lower production stuff. With OBS, there's a bunch of online tools that people use through browser sources with like overlays and stuff, which is really amazing. A lot of other tournaments use that. But my go has been through vMix basically, and that's also how I ran the Empowerment Cup that we ran with Reflash last year in February.
Yeah.
Was through vMix as well.
Okay. So you said, I'm assuming the 1,200 is just for using vMix, right? Not OBS.
Yeah, it's for vMix,
Yeah.
1,200. OBS is obviously free. It's an open source program. So.
And then you said scripting. What type of scripting can you do as someone who's a coder?
There's quite a few like functions you have within vMix. You can create different like on this queue this will happen and stuff. There's I haven't gone into it properly. I know a friend of mine who also works at Blast does a few vMix shows, and he goes every time he has something new to learn and just experiments basically with it. It's like scripting. Don't even know the language that they use, but yeah, there's some stuff that you can put in there. Fun bit.
Okay, cool. So Solomon, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, you've probably got the best seat to ask about this because Arif does lots of vMix and we use so much OBS.
Yeah.
To be honest, the comparisons between OBS and vMix could have like a 6-hour video on YouTube and you wouldn't even hit the sides of it. But yeah, like vMix has a very big upfront cost. They've recently added a new tier, which is $50 a month, which is much more attainable. You can build it into a show cost. So whenever you're saying, yeah, we can do your show for this amount, you add on the $50 and there's your software cost. So it's making it a lot more easily approachable, especially for smaller tournaments now. Like we can afford to put it into our shows if we want to. And yeah, vMix is becoming much more of an industry standard, especially in esports. It can do a lot more. OBS, you can do a lot of things in it. There's things that vMix does a lot better, but OBS has always been, it's the OG, right? It's open. There are so many plugins. If you want to do something on it, someone's written a plugin for it. And for our stuff, we have pretty much an entire stream package, all just web-based. I'm a developer by heart, so OBS can have a billion web sources in it, and you can control everything remotely. So we have a stream running right now, and I can just press some buttons and make it look completely different. It's beautiful. And it's the barrier to entry for it is really low. There are so many people, because it's so open and everyone can use it and it's all free. There's so many tutorials on it. And there's tutorials for vMix as well, but if you search for the tutorials on YouTube, you're going to see so many OBS ones. Anything you'd ever want to do, you can learn online. And so the sky really is the limit. There's a lot more you have to do to get the same things that you potentially get out of vMix. vMix is really good if you want to go that next stage ahead. You want to do lots of audio routing or video routing, have multiple outputs, all that kind of stuff. vMix is simpler in that respect. But vMix is becoming so much more attainable, especially with that price drop.
Yeah.
That more people can get into it.
That's really good to know. Synapse, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I would say that a lot of one of the things that is coming up and why I'm so interested in this is because of that low barrier to entry that was brought up. And it really kind of is industry wide. And I'm going to make a statement that this industry shift to content creation and the idea of of getting your information via streaming services, YouTube, Twitch, and things like that is turning a lot of these companies into producers, or an influencer into a producer, or so these tools are becoming more and more accessible. So now that we have a whole generation of folks coming into the industry that are video producers and have produced basically television shows remotely, it's an incredible influx of talent into the industry that is focused on newer technology like the NDI streams, the fact that we're running this stream remotely, that whole generation of remote streaming is relatively fairly new. I'll say in the last 5 to 10 years has really come into market, and production houses are all used to doing physical hardwire SDI stuff around. So it's really having to shift the gears of companies that are used to having a lot of physical pieces of equipment to shifting to more of a virtual space with a vmix and a lot of these remote sources. It's really moving more towards IT, the information of things, and everything has an IP address now. It's kind of wild.
Mhm. That's very interesting. Pizza, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd say that I think especially due to the pandemic, a lot of big companies moved their production over to vMix. And I think like overall, as I said, like it is a huge industry shift. And I think the pandemic was the biggest push. I've worked with a lot of people who come from traditional sports, and in traditional sports, there was this massive hesitancy from going from these hardware-based solutions that are like ROS, Expression, Carbonite, these like very expensive like hardware-based production equipment
Mhm.
that like your the thing that pushes your graphics is 20 grand. Like the
What?
actual hardware. Yeah, no, like it's literally like a deck has a bunch of buttons and outputs and it is $20,000 or
Holy
more. And that's like an
moly.
average cost. And so when my last company, eStars, like our production room was $1 million. Like the equipment was so
Wow.
expensive because that's just what traditional sports uses. Like if you've ever seen those photos, it's like behind the scenes and blah
Yeah.
blah blah. You'll see these like all these monitors, all these little dashboards with buttons and stuff.
Hmm.
All of that equipment is absorbently expensive. But
Right.
during the pandemic, when stuff had to go remote, people figured out like if you imagine like CNN, right? You
Yeah.
could produce the entire CNN show out of vMix and instead of doing a whole studio. They don't
Right.
do that. But like during the pandemic, a lot of companies realized, oh, we can't go into the office. We have to do this from home. How do we do this from home? Because we can't bring our $1 million equipment into someone's home. That's a huge risk, right?
Yeah.
So they found out like, oh, vMix is $1,200 and we can cut half of our production staff. Oh, our show is now only X money. And I think it
Huh.
just changed a lot for the industry overall. And the loss from going from that to vMix, you lose things. There are really some really cool
Yeah.
things that like production equipment, like the hardware based solutions can do, but the software can is like has caught up to the point with vMix where it's not the loss is not super marginal.
Okay.
So
I was gonna ask about that. So also, I guess my follow up question is: do you see like a shift happening where literally even like live events like CNN started using vMix over like hardware just because it's inherently cheaper and the functionality already exists? I mean, it would be a little sad though because then you would see like a lot of less production people right in the office. But do you see that happening just because of costs and stuff, or not?
um
Not sure.
I'm not too sure as an expert, but I know from the esports side, a lot of companies are doing this. Most like almost all esports now, I think even the high level, they do a mix of like vMix and these hardware based solutions.
Mhm.
And you can kind of mix and match, but I will say it's definitely like scaled down. It's not like the traditional sports where like the barrier to entry is $1 million control room,
Mhm.
where now it's a bit of a mix and match. But I do think a lot of, especially in esports, a lot of companies are just moving to the software based, where you are able to still keep a relative quality, but not lose
Okay.
too much of a hit.
So just to clarify, to make sure I understand this as
Mhm.
well. So when you say like hardware based stuff, a lot of that tool is obviously still needed, just physical hardware. but vMix is able to emulate that on a software level and be able to do it that way. Is that sort of how you'd say it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can run graphics through vMix
Right.
alone, but there are some like hardware-based solutions that do graphics where it's like everything's built into the actual like machine that you use, and then also like for people who do like technical directing or other roles, some of that stuff can be done on vMix, and some of that stuff can be done on like a giant dashboard. It's very expensive.
Interesting. Okay. Anyone have any other thoughts on different tools and sort of how they compare and stuff?
I would say that like I don't necessarily think shifting to software is necessarily a bad thing. I think we talked about this a little bit, that the barrier to entry in almost every way is becoming lower, and that's only going to be a better thing for our scene and for video production, right?
Right.
If you think about where people would have had to get broadcast skills before a lot of the last few years, where we had lots of online and software-based stuff, where are you going to get this? You're going to have to go to a university or college. You have to find some like remote TV station. But then how do you get the the skills for that? But now you can teach yourself in your bedroom. You can grab a Stream Deck. You have pretty much just a mini version of a CNN room, right? You've got your monitors, got your switcher on your vMix. You got your buttons. What more do you need? And now you can bring that into huge event scale things. You can be a reef. You can go off and press even more buttons. And that barrier to entry for both the software, because you can get it, the hardware, because you can get the Stream Decks. Shout out Companion. And see, for people who don't know, Companion is this amazing software which basically turn an Elgato Stream Deck, which you see in streamers use all the time, into proper broadcast things with all the lights and all that kind of stuff. And it's used all over now. There are people who just have, where you see the banks of buttons, you just have banks of Stream Decks, and it's great. It's all done, all written, all the software is written by the community. So shout out Companion. But yeah, the barrier to entry is just dropping so much, and that's only a good thing.
That's really cool.
Agreed. It's I think there's going to be just a whole wave of new talent and new creativity entering the market that is going to really put a lot of people in a light that's going to maybe not even been planned for. I think it's really going to elevate that opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been just really quick. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Like,
my bad.
I've been going to university at this, and this is the only place in the UK really that I, as a student, can even access this kind of hardware, like physical solutions. Like we have Blackmagic desks that we can use, audio desks, lighting, venues with Disguise and other ROS actually solutions as well. And that's only because that university specifically invested into a new building for that. And it's really hard to come by. And that's really the gatekeeping of like that technology is like really big in esports. Because those kind of hardwares, you don't just come by them because you're interested. You ask someone, "Hey, can I just press some buttons and see how this works?" Like, no, it costs $100,000. You can't touch that kind of stuff. Like, you just very lucky with the university to have access to those kind of things.
That's an awesome point. Thanks for adding that. Yeah, I can definitely relate to at least some coding related architectures or more tools, I guess I'd say, that are very expensive. There's no way I would have touched in university because it's like $100K. But now that I'm in a job field and the company pays for it, now I can mess around with it, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to the next topic about like your ideal staff amount. So like I'm really curious, like when I do my events, right, I normally have like 2-3 admins, and that varies depending on how big the tournament's gonna be. And then on top of that, I'll look to have obviously a production team, shout out BPL, but I'll have a production team, and then I'll sort of like tell them what my needs and wants, and then they'll sort of advise, how many like observers they need, producer, casters and stuff like that. And even if we want to do an analyst desk, it's something thinking about in the near future. But that's sort of how we approach that. I'm curious your guys' thoughts about how does like your ideal team work, not just in terms of just production, but in terms of organization. and even a PM side and everything. And I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but anyone want to start with that?
On Reflash as an example, we don't have that much stuff. We have a few like social media people, content creators and whatnot. But when it goes to national production, we usually, especially stuff like Open Division, we split it between a lot of people. But if we were to run a tournament like Empowerment Cup, a team of like essential people between 5 to 15, maybe. We had a lot of admins as well, tournament organizers, we had producers, observers from all around the world as well. An ideal to run a show that's interesting and brings those people together with like different ideas is like at the Empowerment Cup as an example. Like around 20 people is what we usually strive for, want to do, but a lot of the time either we get limited by budget limitations, and it gets really hard sometimes.
Okay. Solomon, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the amount of staff is almost directly just the amount of budget you have or the kind of things you're trying to accomplish. When we do our regular BPL events, we often have more staff than we equivalent tournaments. We always have multi observers, a bunch of people on cast and analyst desks and stuff, which is pretty unique, especially because people aren't getting paid for this. Everyone's just doing this because they love it. But it really depends when we're coding stuff for bigger events. It kind of scales how much that it comes back to this whole needs and wants of different stakeholders. You really want to do an analyst test, okay? Then let's make sure we've got people for that. You want to do some replays between rounds. You want to do some extra shots. You want to make sure that the broadcast is really perfect. It's all going to add up to more money at the end of the day, which drives into how many people you can afford to hire.
So one thing you said is replays, and I'm really curious. Not only first of all, how does this work, but how does that work into like your members? Could you go more into that?
Yeah. So replay operator will be it can be a whole team. VCC is a really great example of replays. You'll see them; they are probably some of the best in the world. You'll see them after every single round. You'll have replays from every single perspective. You'll see crowd shots. You'll see player cam reactions. There's some amazing videos on Twitter of them using hardware solutions, EVS solutions, to just really, really quickly scrub through every single angle, find exactly what they want to show, and show it like within seconds. If you think how quickly they have to do it, they're lightning fast.
But how did they do that in seconds? I guess are they literally just like looking through all the different like videos or inputs and stuff that they're seeing from different sources?
And if you don't mind, I can jump in on that.
Yeah.
Last said like replay operator that works on the CT also works at Last, and I'm in the in-game room, in-game feed room basically, and it's 3 different people on EVS machines and also a slow-mo TV machine. So this one specific person just has a bunch of player cameras, has the in-game kill feed and stuff on their screen, basically tries to pick out those kills as fast as they can. It's like it's more of a skill kind of based thing. People have to like get used to it, work really fast with their softwares, get used to them. I think it just takes a lot of training. It's fascinating because I don't understand most of the stuff and how they get all that going, because I'm only doing TeamSpeak replays. But for them having to, because they coordinate as well, like take my feed now, take his feed,
right,
and it's nuts. They get crazy.
That's very, very interesting. Yeah, I was always curious about that. So also, I guess my other question follow up with this, a little tangent here, is so you know how some like hashers will talk about maybe some like they'll be like, oh man, yeah, Dynasty just popped off, like a player in Overwatch just popped off. He got like a 3K with like his Genji blade, and then all of a sudden a replay will pop up, right? Is that because the person in the back got the replay and then like they queued that to the casters, or is it because the casters said it and they had it and then they posted it? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's usually production up.
Okay.
Casters can often like it takes a while. So Overwatch is quite different because we have an actual in-game viewer in Overwatch. You'll see it sometimes when the stream breaks. You'll see the little menu, but you'll see when they have all the nice slow-mos, especially after a round. They have an in-game viewer, so they'll be able to rewind the round, record whatever they want, and show as a replay. The people in production will always be able to hear the casters, so you'll be able to hear if they're talking about certain players, you can spectate them more. You can show certain things. You can either confirm stuff they've done. Say like, oh, I think this guy had an Ajax beat, and then you can show in a replay later. Or they can bubble stuff up the other way and show that, oh, here's a cool replay, and then it just appears on their screens.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I went on a little tangent.
I
But
love it.
back to talking about, I guess, ideal staff amount and sort of the scope, the work and stuff. That was very interesting though. So anyone else have stuff to add for this? So Synapse, you have anything?
Yeah,
you
yeah,
wanna-
synops. Yeah, the only thing I'd put on there is that it's really scope dependent, and
Mhm.
it depends on the scale of the production. What we're gonna do for a college 250 kind of land, bring your own
Mhm.
computer event. It's gonna be different than something that's gonna be happening in Dallas at an arena, and we got 2,500 more. So it really is the scope of the event determines the staff. But you're talking about the production team in inner circle staff, like how many close people are working. I would offer a question up to the group is who owns the deliverable of the live event in your experiences? Who owns that deliverable? If something like, is it the stream that takes precedence over the live event, or does the live event take precedence over the stream if there's some sort of conflict?
Interesting. So like you're saying, like for example, for like me, I guess. So like for me, like when I do my events, right, we normally have our admin team. They do it, and then they sort of like we work with BPL. Is that sort of what you're getting at?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, let's say you were doing a live event, and I think
Mhm.
I know the answer, but the discussion is you have two audiences at that point. You've got an audience that's in person that
Mhm.
needs to be experiencing that moment, and then
Right.
you have a virtual audience that's an audience that's remote. So,
Mhm.
which audience takes precedence if there's an issue that needs to be resolved with
That's
timing
very
or whatever?
interesting. Anyone's got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say it does vary because I think like a live experience versus the remote experience is like very drastic, and a lot of times they will combat each other and be budget dependent. Because if you want to prioritize your live experience, that also drives up the cost, as we talked about a bit before. Because there's a lot more factors you have to consider, and
Mhm.
things that are like very small things of just like, oh, your casters, they're remote, can't cast in the venue, or if they do, then you have to find a way to like make sure their audio's not bleeding and make sure that like the venue sound is not spoiling the stream if the stream is delayed, and all these little small things that just amp up the cost and the precautions. So I think there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And I will say, I think that the live venue experience, like generally, I think should be prioritized because those people are your most dedicated base that are going
Mhm.
to like propagate love for your product. And if you serve them best, that's best for your brand overall. It's kind of my thought.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.